A very good morning once again, and you're still watching Sunrise at Sea here on CTV. Welcome to our Twitter Jabs too, and right now we are, going on with the conversation about street children. Yesterday, the 12th of April 2022 was the International Day for Street Children, and it was celebrated worldwide. And this comes back from the day when the first time it was celebrated was in 2012, and this has gone on and on over the years. And yesterday in Uganda, there was a celebration for street children as well, and this is where street children came together, to talk about their grievances, to talk about their plight, and seeing how non-governmental organizations and organizations can come in and help street children to be off the streets. And then the other thing is the fact that the Ministry of Gender, Social and Development came on, to put this whole week long, from yesterday all the way up to Friday, to be a day to commemorate street children, to celebrate them. And joining me at the center of this conversation is a gentleman, and his name is Andrew Ndiaguma, and he is the managing director of Creative Generation Foundation, and he will be giving us more insight on the plight of street children in Uganda as well as in the entire world. Good morning, Mr. Andrew.
Good morning, Gagi.
And thank you so much for joining us on set today.
Thank you.
Yes. Yesterday was the International Day for celebrating street children in the entire world and in Uganda as well. Would like you to give us an insight on what this day is about. And before you actually tell us what this day is about, who are the street children?
Street children are young people, actually mostly below the age of 18,
yes,
that have ended up in street situations.
Yes.
They leave home, leave school, there are those who leave their guardians, leave community,
yes,
the indigenous community that they've grown in, and end up living on the streets, which cannot be called a home, of course.
Yes.
They live in the open, they live in undesirable places for a child, on the streets.
On the streets. And how do they come about? For the people out there that do not know how street children come about, because people definitely have their assumptions, how do they come about?
Street children, every child actually has a story. They do not just end up on the streets.
Yes.
There are those who, out of adventure and curiosity, they just get out to try out things and end up in those situations. But every child has their story. There are reasons, there are pushing factors that lead them to come to the streets.
Yes.
It's either poverty, or there's violence at home, or they're neglected, or there is no support at all.
Yes.
There are even those who come from a home that can actually support them,
yes,
but they're neglected.
Yes.
Maybe they're not loved. And then there's also divided homes, whereby parents separate.
Yes.
You bring in a new mother or a new father, and they're not able to live comfortably with that other step-parent.
Yes.
So they end up living permanently, or there are those that actually live and still come back. So that's why the term is changing from street children to street connected children.
Yes.
Some actually adults are also street connected, because you're not direct on the streets, but the conditions and the life that you live is like for those living on the streets.
Okay, so how does the International Street Children Street Children Day come into the picture, and what is the reason why is it celebrated?
What we celebrate is this life that comes after street life.
Okay.
So we commemorate this day.
Yes.
We try to remember these children as children with value as well. They are also children that the society should consider.
Yes.
So it is important to commemorate the day. It was started in 2010, and
yes,
it has been celebrated by CSOs, governments all over the world.
Yes.
To remember these children, to support them, and see ways of how this can be solved.
Yes.
It is one serious thing. It's having street children is something that you cannot solve in a day. So commemoration is a point whereby you get together as working groups, as networks, as government entities, to devise means of how you can solve this problem,
yes,
or reduce it.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's not easy to get rid of a problem all at once.
Okay, before we actually go into the day of celebrating street children and what is going to happen throughout the entire week, I would like you to give us an insight on the Creative Generation Program, and that is the non-governmental organization where you are the managing director. Would like to know from you, what do you do in this organization in regard to the street children?
Creative Generation Foundation is actually an organization that was birthed. It came out of working with street children.
Yes.
It caters for child protection, whereby we have to represent these children, give them a voice, give them a platform, so that they are known, so that they are heard, their stories are heard. Then we also reach out to them by skilling. We give them art skills, art and craft. It's what actually I'm good at. I'm an artist. I can paint, I can draw, I can craft different things. And then we also reach out to them in areas to do with adolescent health. That is to do with sexual reproductive health. Because as children that are living in those conditions, they are exposed to different things.
Yes.
They are engaged in activities that we do not know at a tender age, because they come to a life whereby they are independent. They don't have a parent to guide them. They don't have anyone to show them love.
Yes.
So they end up in that situation and they can decide on anything. So we support them also to do with adolescent health or sexual reproductive health initiatives. Yes. Creative Generation, its backbone is actually on the street. Okay. Because it started as weekend outreach. Me as the founder, I have been in these streets working with these children because I have a passion. I have the love, and it's beyond the love that you actually get people to work together collectively and see how to put an organization into place that can support them beyond just an outreach. Well,
that is a very good initiative, and kudos to you and the rest of the members of this organization. But I would like to ask you, how has the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development been significant in helping to address the issues of street children, and the government as well as other non-governmental organizations? Do we have child protective services and units as well in this country?
Yeah, we have quite many. The government has been so supportive through the Ministry of Gender.
Yes.
There's actually a minister in charge of youth and children affairs.
Yes, absolutely.
So they have supported. They cannot do everything. Resources are never enough because there's a lot to do. There's a lot to handle. And issues to do with children are really sensitive.
Yes.
So CSOs are really doing a great job.
Yes.
Like the CRANE network that brings over several organizations that work with children. Children at Risk Network, that's CRANE. It's actually the one that led with the Ministry of Gender to commemorate the day, to have an activity to engage with these children.
Yes.
So government is doing its part, though somehow people tend to say it is not acting fast like it has to.
It's good that you're giving us first-hand information that actually government is doing something to help these street children. However, I would like you to actually tell us in detail, what is it doing? What are those initiatives that the government is putting in place? How are they funding it? You know, who is doing what in this initiative?
So the government mainly gives us a platform. It gives us a working ground, a leveled ground, where we are able to interact with different people. They give us permits, they give us licenses, they help in registration, and whatever you're working on, there are people called probation officers who work for government. There are child protection officers also in the police under the Child and Family Protection Unit who support these organizations. Whatever you do is being monitored. Where you get challenges, they are supporting you. Where there are no funds, like you asked about government funding, it cannot fund everything. It funds at a different level, like supporting these days, commemoration. It brings people together and hears the stories, because organizations have worked directly with these kids, like Creative Generation does. We understand these kids. We are directly working with them. So government hears these voices, take back issues to Parliament, and they see how to channel funds to support children. So that's why in the recent years, about 3 billion was released in the previous Parliament, the 10th Parliament, to support these children and see how they can get off the streets, or to work through KCCA and put up an institution to skill them, to give them empowerment, so that even when they're off the streets, there's no reason to come back. Okay,
I would like you to tell me about those institutions, and what are those institutions that you're talking about that the government has put in place, or that the non-governmental organizations have put in place to rehabilitate these street children? And the other thing I would like to know is, are these street children actually receptive? Because many of them tend to be abusive, which is actually true. We cannot downplay that fact. So are they receptive to these initiatives? Are they joining in, or they are on the other end, waiting to be pushed? Or you have to, put an extra push for them?
So government has no homes, it has no centers, but there are some rehabilitation homes that like under organizations.
Yes.
So the government supports in getting these children off the streets through KCCA, through the Child and Family Protection Unit.
Yes.
To connect these children to these organizations that have institutions, that have care homes, where they can actually go and be empowered. So what you're saying about them being not easy people, not easy children, it's actually a fact.
Yes.
But it's because they have grown up without love, without attention, so they can turn into anything, because they turn to crime because it's the only means of survival. If I have to steal to get a meal, then it's the option they have. But if they had grown up a decent way, they have been groomed, they will understand the best channels of how to survive. But most of these children are good. Me, as a person that has worked with them, that has lived there with them, I understand them. So there are many of them that actually are good. Even when you tell them to stop something, they actually want to stop it. I even ask you, how do I stop doing drugs? They're like, ango ndikumafuta, like they're using they sniff some material.
Yes.
So they're like, I'm doing this every day, but I'm getting tired of it. So how can I get rid of it?
Yes.
They still go back to it because it's an addiction. They've done it for so long,
Yes.
but they're always looking for a way out.
Yeah, but this is how the rehabilitation centers, come in. But let's talk about the role of non-governmental organizations. What measures are non-governmental organizations putting in place, to curb down the challenges of street children, to see how they can reconnect them to their families, those that do have families and those that do not, to find for them shelter, to find for them food, so that they can go off the street and, have a meaningful and worthwhile life?
It's actually quite a challenge.
Yes.
But it's something that you handle gently, process by process. Because when you rescue them, the government helps in rescuing.
Yes.
It doesn't do it directly, but it has given the organizations a go-ahead to do it. And it supports them, whereby you have to report to the police, you have to report to probation officers. So when you rescue them, you have to rehabilitate them.
Yes.
Because you're not getting them and like, go back home. Even when you go back to the streets, you do not tell children go back home. Because when they leave the streets, when they come to the streets, they have several reasons. They have reasons that push them to come to the streets.
Yes.
So when you're supporting them to go back, they have to be rehabilitated before you work on the process of reintegrating them or reunifying them with their families or their communities.
Yes.
So you have to support them by, first of all, giving them love. Showing them they're also valuable, speaking with a language to show them that you are also children that are actually important to this
deserving of
nation.
a decent life.
We shouldn't treat them as a loss to their generation
Yes.
because they feel they're different from other children. But when you show them that they are actually valuable, then you are connecting with them to see how to support them, to get them back to a community and then back to a family.
Okay, and also I'd like us to talk about the issue of sensitization. How much sensitization has been done or put into place? And this goes on the side of parents, especially, I'll give you an example of many refugees who come into this country, from South Sudan and other countries. There's usually able-bodied women and men seated on the streets of Kampala with their children, begging and all that. And I always have an issue with it. I'll talk about it even here. Because this is an able-bodied mother who could, go out there and get a job or do something, to see that their children live a worthwhile life. But they are seated on the streets of Kampala with their children. And then those that actually send them to the street to be the ones to earn the living because they are supposed to be in school. So how much sensitization has been done on the part of the parents, to be able to understand that, these kids do not belong on the street. They belong, in schools and any other institutions.
So the sensitization has actually been done to actually a much wider level, where the government, through KCCA, through child protection working groups, street connected working networks, where organizations go to communities and speak to these parents. Because we even signed a consortium where the KCCA was telling people, don't give handouts. Because like you're saying, mothers are on the streets. You even actually find an able person, like you're well, but you're pushing someone on a wheelchair to beg.
Yes.
Yet you
absolutely.
actually
able-bodied.
You can work.
Yes.
Even the person that you're pushing on the chair can also work.
Yes.
It happens with children, with adults, we've seen it. But they feel begging is a way that can bring in money quickly, because even opportunities are not there.
Yes.
If you don't have someone to give you a hand. So back to the families and parents.
Yes.
The system, the government reaches out to them and creates awareness. And also these organizations actually do more, even where the government is not able to reach. Some people come from far. They don't come from here near, in Kampala, in major cities, in Jinja, in Mbale,
they come all the way
Mbarara.
from Gulu to the streets of Kampala.
You can actually find
a
child from the north on the streets in Kampala, a child from the far east in Mbale, in Tororo, in Kampala. So it goes back to organizations creating awareness to children, to parents in communities, because what we should actually work on is community, to prevent the factors that are in the community that push the kids to end up to come on the streets. Because reaching out to kids on the streets, that's why KCCA comes up with a consortium and organization sign that we shouldn't give handouts. We shouldn't give money directly to these children, because you're attracting them. Even those who are not on the streets know I actually can come to the streets, beg, or do some petty things, and then earn a living.
Absolutely.
So it will keep the vice here, it will keep the problem here.
Yes.
So the awareness should be done more, even with media, even with CTV here.
We are doing it
We
just
are doing
right now.
it. We can share this. There are many people that are watching us, so they get to hear and they can actually send a message to someone who is close to them in community, to a local council leader, so that we prevent the problem. If there is violence, let's tackle violence before the child leaves the home to end up on the streets. If there is poverty, how can we support them within their communities, within their homes, so that they do not end up on the streets where life is really hard? Because like during COVID, I was among those that was walking streets, because everything was paused. I was walking, being stopped. I was arrested because I was trying to speak for these children. When the government said, go home, leave the streets, the slogan was, it was a hashtag. Homes they're like, stay home, stay safe. But then these are children who are on the streets, who are over 15,000 around the country. And a study by Dwelling Places shows there are 1,500 in 3 districts, in 3 major towns in Uganda, Kampala, Jinja, and is it Mbale? But these are children that have nowhere to go. So when you stay home, stay safe, they stay on the streets, yet you're trying to clear the streets, you're beating them up. To go where? They were not given sanitizer. That was
no masks, no nothing.
No masks, no one reached out to them. And we as Creative Generation ran fast to actually ask government to do something. We called on church groups, we called on people that, well-wishers, to see how we can support these children. And people responded. Because at that time they had no one. They had no love, and some of them actually had to walk miles to go back home. So that I do not die on these streets. Everyone was scared of COVID in the first lockdown. So these children also walked back. Getting back home, the problem you left there is still there. So you now walk back to the streets.
Okay, so let's talk about the children who, are pushed to the streets because of violence back at home. What is the procedure of reuniting them to their parents? Because in this instance, you find the children in that moment actually do detest going back home, and they go as far as detesting their parents or guardians as well. So what is that procedure, for reuniting them with their parents?
So one, you have to rehabilitate them. Find out the real story. Because like I shared earlier, the story they share at the beginning is not always the fact. Sometimes they give you a story because maybe they think you're going to report them to the police, maybe you're going to push them to go back home. Yet they have reasons why they left home. So first understand the story, what pushed them to come to the streets. If I'm to take them back home, is there a stepmother? Will I change the situation at home? You might not be able to change the situation. But there are care homes, there are organizations with rehabilitation centers. There are remand homes. Remand homes actually by the government.
Yes, yes.
Whereby they can go and be supported. Although the life might not be easy there, but it's a process. Identify, trace, we trace back.
Yes.
Where before you end up to the streets. If you came from the village in Gulu, in Mbale, in Jinja, to end up in Kampala, what was the journey? How did you move? Where was the first place you stayed? Who took care of you? Who supported you?
Okay.
Have you done drugs? Support them to stop. Have you maybe been engaging in theft, in pickpocketing? Or
so that you ascertain how to help them.
How to help them. Because you might take away the part of you have taken them back home. You've even linked them to an organization that can support them and even sponsor them to go back to school. But have you solved the problem of drugs? Have you solved the problem of theft that they have learnt on the streets? The government can come out and say, we want to stop the gangs. We see them arresting even older ones. But they have grown up on the streets in that life. So it's a process. You have to understand the whole story before you trace back on how you can link them back to the community. There are those that are willing to go back, they request and can go back. We've seen children cry before their parents, and parents are like, I actually thought I'd lost my child, but I'm glad they're back.
That's a good thing. Let's talk about the child protective services in Uganda and how available they are and how effective they are, especially to the street children.
The one that we are pushing so much as networks to work with children, organizations working with children, is the toll-free helpline.
Yes.
The Sauti 116.
Yes.
This is a helpline that can be called by anyone.
Yes.
As long as you see a child who needs help. Maybe they're facing violence, maybe you've met them on the streets and they feel they need to be taken back to the community. You can dial that number. On anyone's phone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. Any phone. It's 116 Sauti. So you can speak to someone on the other end and they see how to support you and link you to an organization, to a government entity that is working with children to see how to solve the problem that you're dealing with at that moment. Then there are also remand homes. Remand homes, the word remand scares people, but of course the kids on the streets do not understand it. For us who speak English, you like remand. Are they into like a prison or? But these are centers where they can go to be supported. KCCA looks for means of how to support them. If they're organizations, they link them to those organizations. But mainly it is work done by NGOs like us, the Creative Generation, and many others. That is supporting these children. They are the ones that have the homes, they're the ones that have the centers, the rehabilitation centers. So we are many. We have to come together and solve one big problem because no one can solve it by themselves. Well,
could you give us your final remarks, on this issue of street children, and also the fact that we are going to be commemorating this whole entire week is set aside, to commemorate street children. What would be your final remarks on this particular matter?
My final remark would be to speak to someone out there, including the government, to actually value these children, because we shouldn't consider them as a loss to their generation. Because if we lose children now, we do not have a future. Because they are our message to the future where we shall not reach.
Absolutely.
Like our parents and grandparents that passed or are still here, but they do not have much more ahead. We are the message to the future. So these children should be loved, should be cared for, because they can also become something in society.
Absolutely.
They are gifted in art, in music, different creativity. They are gifted and they're smart because they have less to think about. They don't have school to stress them. They focus on something and they can actually do it very well. So let's show them love. Let's support them and see how they can get off the streets and have a better life, because they're children like others.
Okay, and this week being the Holy Week that is leading us to Easter. Yes, Easter Sunday and Easter Monday as well. What preparations are in place for the street children?
As Creative Generation, we have, as we commemorate International Day for Street Children, because it's their week, we are also celebrating Easter as a holiday. So on 16th of which is Saturday of this month, we shall have a fun moment with kids in Boise. There's a place called Mainja Zone. We shall share a meal, have fun games, board games, some soccer, eat good food like on
Yeah.
that day.
Yes.
It's on Saturday, as we remember Easter. It so happened that in 2020, Easter and International Day for Street Children happened on the same day. So it was something to commemorate and also celebrate,
Yes.
share the love, because we were doing well back home, but we had to get back to the streets
Yes.
and celebrate with these children and show them hope, give them a message for the future,
Okay.
and change their story.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Andrew Ndiaguma, and he is the Managing Director of Creative Generation Foundation. We thank you so much for every initiative that you have put in place, you know, to rehabilitate the street
Thank you
children
so much.
and giving them a life of meaning. And
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
joining
much.
us on Sunrise at Sea.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be that I was here to share this.
Okay, well, that wraps up the conversation that we had for you on the Twitter Jabs too, but do not go anywhere. Sunrise at Sea continues. Don't blink.